my friends, how are we doing today? How's it going? I missed last week's live and I can only apologise, but behind the scenes my life is getting chaotic with a capital C. This Saturday we have got the Garth Country Fair, super excited to be welcoming some of you to Wales. Some of you are actually going to be coming down and seeing the farm, seeing behind the scenes of where I live in my little picturesque Welsh country lifestyle. So I'm really excited for that, but as you know, yeah, it's a lot of work, there's a lot going on. So I'm equally looking forward in the best way possible to it being over so that you can have my undivided attention yet again. But today, I wanted to come on here and I wanted to give you a few top tips, 5 to be precise, rules, important rules when it comes to pattern matching your sewing projects. Now, I have filmed something similar in the past. You will be able to find it on YouTube, but I filmed it on what can only be described as a potato. So I'm hoping to bring you a higher quality, clearer video format with, of course, some extra top tips to up-level this bit of content. Now, over in the DPL Atelier, my members and I are transitioning into month 3 of the Create, Cut, Construct framework. We have been drafting, designing and getting started with our very own trouser patterns. So month 3, we are transitioning into Construct, which is all about sewing them up at a machine. And so today, I thought it would be useful for those that are doing really funky trouser designs to just touch upon some pattern matching, because as we know, especially when it comes to the centre back seam here or anything like that, you can really elevate a garment into a much more higher standard by matching up those patterns. And a really quick way to see if something is high street rather than high end is to look out for things like that. If your pattern matching's off, then it's a lower quality product. So you're going to be able to see here, if I turn this sideways, this is my trouser block. Now this has been drafted. A trouser block or a block of any description is a very foundational garment. There are no bells and whistles on this. You can see that there is a welt pocket that's been drafted, but there's no bells and whistles on this. It is the basic foundational version of the garment, and once you draft a block that fits you, which is what we do in the DPL Atelier, you can then elaborate and hack into it to create more advanced designs, which again is what we do in the DPL Atelier. So I'm just going to be using these blocks for the purpose of the demonstration. And rule number 1, when you come to pattern matching, we are just going to jump into it, guys. You know I don't hang around and love to just jump into the value, is to consider your seam allowance. Now, if you are working with a PDF pattern or a shop bought pattern and this seam allowance has not been marked on, so here you can see that this is 1.5. Let me just remove my fabric from underneath. We'll bring that back in a minute. Here you can see that my seam allowance is about 1.5, but say that it was a pattern that basically says seam allowance included, as they tend to do, and it's just a kind of blank template like this. The first thing you want to do to get started with pattern matching is establish that seam allowance. And so if your pattern said 1 centimetre included, you would be marking 1 centimetre in from the edge. Now the tool I'm using here is a Pattern Master, but you can absolutely achieve that with a ruler if you just want to mark in and put dots along the edge all the way up and connect them by hand. It's a little bit more inaccurate, obviously, but as a home sewist, that is absolutely possible. And again, if it was 1.5 centimetres, which this one is, so what I mean by that, you could just get a standard household ruler and you can mark 1.5 centimetres in from the edge all around your pattern before connecting the dots. So what you want to do, first step, is just establish your seam allowance like so. Because when we come to match up our patterns, sometimes people can match up right to the edge here. But what happens then is when you're sewing this together, and if I fold this down to show you, so this becomes your line of stitching. If we're sewing that together and matching these up, because you've matched up the edge, this entire 1.5 centimeters is enclosed in the garment and not visible from the right side of the garment when it's worn. So therefore, if you are pattern matching, you want to be matching along your stitch line here from where the garment is visible. And to do that then, consider your seam allowance. You want to mark that in. You then kind of, for a super quick and easy way, lay your pattern over your fabric and your textile with the print on it. Line it up, so make sure that you are still coinciding with the grain line here. You don't want to be, unless it's obviously bias or whatever, but you don't want to be putting this on an angle. You need your pattern piece to still align to the grain line, super important. Have you, quick tangent, you know I love a tangent. Have you ever noticed t-shirts that you buy from ready-to-wear shops that slowly the side seam twists, or over time they just warp out of shape? That is because the grain line would have been cut slightly off. So you really want to avoid that. So make sure that number one, your grain line is marked, matched up. But what you then want to do when you're happy with that is you want to just draw on your pattern. Now this could be whatever intricate pattern you have. You just want to start to draw this on. So what I'm going to do in order to give me some balance markers is I'm going to draw on these squares, making sure that I'm crossing over my seam allowance. So again, don't forget, we're not trying to match up to this edge here. We're trying to match it crossing over our stitch line so that when we can see the garment from the right side, it's only ever the fabric that is exposed and not enclosed in the seams. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to mark on these squares. Now, of course, you can draw as intricately as you like the textile design, but I'm just going to translate these little hearts over. And then what I would do, amongst other things, I'm going to give you a few additional steps in between, but then what I would do is I would transfer the drawing onto this pattern piece, which is my front leg, this is my back leg, this is my side seam. I would be transferring that onto the front piece and making sure that these all aligned and that they matched up, so that when we overlaid them like so, they were matching. There is a very important lesson you need to know though. Having a look at these, if I bring these further down, you can see there is a slight curve around the hip. It is impossible to pattern match all the way along a curved line, and so your best bet is to simply pattern match the horizontal plane. Now by that, as I say, you'll be able to notice that this kind of splits off as it goes up. Therefore, you're not going to be able to perfectly pattern match that when we bring these seams together. So the best route of action is to simply pattern match along your horizontal balance lines and just pattern match the plane here. Look at how this line, if I drew my pencil across, would connect like so. This is a really easy one to see with ginghams, checks, plaids, anything like that. It's really easy to experiment with, especially if you're a beginner. So your best bet is to just match it horizontally along the horizontal plane like so. You are never going to get a perfect match along a curved line. And so the straighter lines of these trouser legs, or alternatively if you were doing a pocket or anything like that, you will absolutely be able to pattern match. So the first thing you want to do is sketch over where the pattern is. Now, you may find that you have a main pattern piece or a pattern piece you want to use as an anchor. Say you definitely want a certain area of the pattern to be visible on the front left of a jacket, say. You would definitely be cutting out your front left jacket piece first, because when you come to pattern match, whatever your main pattern piece is or your anchor pattern piece, you're going to be using that as the foundation for all the other pattern matching. So the first thing you want to do is decide of which main pattern piece you want to start with, and the rest of your garment can be built around that. So say that I did want my back trouser leg to have a certain element of the pattern on it, I can then pattern match, sketch onto the seam allowance, and build my garment around that. Once you have established that, cut out your main pattern piece only, so the first pattern piece, if that is an anchor, as I say, front left jacket, whatever it is. And what you then want to do once you've cut it out in fabric is you want to fold your seam allowance under, like so. Now let me show you what I mean on a very small half patch pocket here. I have no idea why I've cut out a measly half one. I should have done a full one, but either way, this is scrap fabric. So, say this would be my anchor pattern piece. I wanted to make sure that my patch pocket was the focus of the design. I wanted to make sure that it definitely had certain print placement. And again, I'll get onto print placement in another workshop that I'll be doing in the coming weeks. So if you haven't already, subscribe. Pop on over to my email list and subscribe. You get all of the workshops sent to you straight to your inbox so you don't miss anything. But I will be doing the importance of print placement and things to consider in the coming weeks. But in terms of pattern matching, if this was my anchor pattern, another thing I could do, of course, would be to cut out my first anchor pattern, and then with pins or basting, I could line that up accordingly. It's by here for anybody who thinks it's disappeared. And you can then pin that in place, or you could mark with, not a pencil, with a bit of tailor's chalk or tailor's tacks, which is just doing a loop of thread. You could mark where the pocket is or whatever part of the pattern it is. Perhaps it's a notch if, again, let me just reach around. If this was my main pattern piece, I could fold my seam allowance under like so, and I could mark with a little bit of thread or a little bit of chalk that line that I would want it to align up to. And then when I come to cut out my next pattern piece, because I have marked it, I'll then therefore be able to line this up with ease. So I really hope it is that simple. It's quite deceptively simple, but I really hope that that has helped you with a little bit more confidence towards pattern matching. So just to recap, number one, always consider your seam allowance. We want to be pattern matching over the seam allowance here where the garment is going to be visible. It doesn't matter if these butt up perfectly and you're kind of pattern matching this bit here, because when you come to sew it, this entire 3 centimeters, 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, this entire 3 centimeters is going to be enclosed in the garment. So we want to make sure that we are pattern matching along the stitching line here. Number two, you want to decide on an anchor pattern piece or a main pattern piece if that relates to your design. If it doesn't, ignore it, just go ahead to the next steps and start to match up your patterns. But if you have specific print placement that you want on a certain area of the garment, cut that area of the garment first. Number four, press your seam allowance underneath, whatever that is on your pattern. So you would be cutting this out in fabric and pressing that underneath. You can then align it to the remainder of your fabric and you'll be able to yet again reassure yourself, taking your time, that your patterns are going to align. Oh, I've missed one. Number three. Number three, don't forget it is impossible to perfectly pattern match around a curved edge, okay? It's impossible. So when you come to that situation, all you can do is make sure that you are pattern matching along the horizontal plane. If you are struggling with this, try it out on some checked fabric first. That is beginner friendly. And then finally, my friends, for the love of God, pin it, baste it, pin it again, check it. Just take your time and you will be able to get beautifully aligned patterns with your work. If you enjoyed this little free workshop, thank you for stopping by. Come and join me over in the DPL Atelier, where I am at my creme de la creme with my fashion members as we create, cut and construct our dream wardrobe. As I say, this month, as we're rounding off month 2 in the Create, Cut, Construct framework, we have just finished pattern drafting our very own trouser designs. As you can see, here is the block here. We're about to be hosting a fitting clinic. I cannot wait to jump into that with my members. They are going to get clothes that fit their beautiful, unique figures. And then month 3, we are rounding off this framework. We're going to be sewing up these designs. So month 1 is fashion design, month 2 is pattern cutting, month 3 is garment construction at the machine or by hand. We cover it all in the DPL Atelier. And then our next framework come October, I'm really jumping ahead of myself, we're going to be doing a basic coat. So come on down and join us. You do not have to follow along with the framework in order to benefit from the membership. I promise you, there is plenty of exclusive online tutorials, workshops, member features, and more, but I won't chew your ear off anymore, my friends. I'll leave it there, and I will catch you on the flip side. Thanks for joining.